Meeting. Ms. Hutchison, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Blattner?
Here.
Mr. Durfee participating remotely. Ms. Colvitz?
Here.
Mr. Long?
Here.
Mr. Paulson?
Here.
Mr. Rutledge?
Here.
Mr. Hamlin?
Here. Mr. Paulson, would you lead us in the pledge, please? All right, board members, are there any modifications to the agenda tonight? Hearing none, we're going to move on. Before we start, I want to remind each board member, really get into your mic tonight. Like if you think you're too close, you're not too close. That's the theme, right? Really get into it. So, Dr. Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Hanlon. So we are pleased this evening to have 3 board recognitions, and we've got a full house for the recognitions. I'm gonna do the first, and then I'm gonna introduce Mrs. Campos to do 2 sets of recognitions from Wheaton Warrenville South. So our first recognition this evening are the 2023-2024 Superintendent Art Award recipients. And so as a reminder for the board, I have an opportunity each year to select pieces of art from the art show at Wheaton Warrenville South and Wheaton North. In addition, the PTA Council does its annual reflections opportunity, and as a part of the reflections ceremony, they select pieces of art from our elementary or middle schools. And so we have 3 students that are here with us this evening that I want to recognize. One that was not able to join us. Just as a quick reminder, all of the artwork is out in the lobby, so if you didn't get a chance to see it on the way in, please do on the way out. So I'm going to start first with our youngest recipient, who is Haley Dupree from Pleasant Hill Elementary. Haley, would you stand up? And Haley, if you wouldn't mind staying standing, because I'm going to ask Reese Jones to join you from Weesbrook. Reese. And then our third recipient that's here this evening, I literally just chose this piece of artwork last week at the art show at Wheaton North High School, is Madison Jackson. Brooke Larson from Wheaton Warrenville South was not able to join us this evening, but was the fourth piece of artwork. And so it's a reminder to all 3 of you that are here, and Brooke that's not here. We purchased those pieces of art. We frame them, and they stay here in our school service center for, we keep them here for 3 years, so you will eventually get that piece of art back if you want it, or you're welcome to leave it with me. I'll gladly take it, but it will be proudly displayed for the next 3 years for everybody to see that comes through our school service center. So congratulations. One more round of applause for the Superintendent Art. All right, for our second recognition this evening, I'm going to introduce Mrs. Campos, principal from Wheaton Warrenville South, who's going to introduce both our esports team state champions and one of our culinary students that earned a top finish in the Pro Star Culinary Competition. Mrs. Campos.
Both of these guys are second-time state champions, as I said, in Fortnite, and they started out with 80 schools compete. That gets broken down into 100 that make it onto the final round, and these two are our number ones out of 100 students who made it to the final round. So congratulations to you guys. And one last thing I will tell you, if you get a chance and you go on, it's on YouTube channel. These guys had the best teammates around. They live streamed the entire, how many hours was it? It was like 4 hours. 4 hours. Their teammates live streamed the entire competition, and when they win at the end, it's priceless. You have to see it. But if you just Google the Fortnite State Championship and go to the end, it's phenomenal. So congratulations again, guys.
Mrs. Bear, did you get pictures beforehand, or you want to grab a picture now?
I got pictures beforehand.
Perfect.
I just need the art students to meet me out there.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you so very, very much for joining us this evening. Super proud. Thank you.
All right, we are on to public comment. So while everyone's making their way out, I'm going to go ahead and read our introduction. Thank you for taking time to share your feedback and thoughtful focus on our students, school, district, and community. It's the board's practice not to directly discuss communication from the community until the context is understood and the information is explored. It's not our intention to signal a lack of interest, and we appreciate your understanding. Depending on the number of people signed up to speak during public comment, Board Policy 2.230 enables the time per speaker to be reduced from 3 to 2 minutes, allowing more people to share their perspective. Tonight, we will not have to reduce the time for each speaker. To maintain confidentiality, the board asks that any matters concerning personnel or students be communicated to the board privately. When we meet, it's important that we all treat each other with kindness and respect. We set an example for our schools and desire to honor that by being courteous in our public comments. Let's work together to lead with positive intent so that our democratic process reflects the best of our community. To help us follow up if needed, please include your name and if you're a resident of the district. To ensure everyone has a chance to speak, Ms. Kulvitz will raise her hand when 15 minutes remain. 15 seconds. 15 minutes would be a little bit much. Anyone want to go for minutes? Okay. 15 seconds is a reminder to wrap up your thoughts. At the end of our agreed time, I'll respectfully ask you to allow the next speaker to begin. Thank you for investing time to attend the board meeting tonight and share your thoughts and encouragement for our district. Our first speaker is Mona Spade. I think we're going to go up to the corner and use the mic and just get right into it. Get right into it. You can't be too close.
Hi, I'm Mona Spade, and after 20 years, this is our final year having a student in the district. I promised myself I wasn't going to cry. I just wanted to speak today to say thank you. Thank you to the administrators, the teachers, and the staff that have touched our lives and have shaped our kids, Danny and Ethan, into the young adults they are today. Many people that aren't even in the district anymore, but we still think of them and are thankful for them. From everyone at Sandburg, Monroe, and Wheaton North, to others in the district that have crossed our paths some other way. I'm sorry. Just a quick trip down memory lane. We were talking over the past couple days. I had asked both Danny and Ethan to give me some names, and we had some very fond memories of Mr. Bacon, Miss Patty, Mrs. Cushman, Mrs. Lenz, Mrs. Cook, Mrs. Maltese, Mrs. Ryder, Mrs. Brown, Miss Hanselman. We know she's married, but she's still Miss Hanselman to us because that's where we started. Miss Whitaker, Mrs. Martyr, Mr. Buck, Mrs. Skibby, Mrs. Torres, Mrs. Clagy, Mrs. Vanderbrook, Ms. Berger, Mr. Hanson, Mr. Biskin, Mr. Cornter, Ms. Castro, Ms. Huffnagel, Ms. McGuire, Ms. Mansour, and Ms. Corso. And the list can just keep going on and on. We're very lucky to have these amazing teachers and staff. We're thankful for the amazing music and performing arts program that the administration continues to support. We're thankful for Mr. Blazek, Mr. Novak, Mr. Nawarda, and Mr. Krause. We're thanking for the marching band and winter guard staff. These programs have touched much more than just the arts. Life lessons, leadership skills, and time management, just to name a few. Thank you to each of you that are sitting up here. Thank you to those that have created the student ambassador opportunity for these students. We appreciate the members of the board for volunteering your time and working hard to make this district a safe and healthy space for everyone. Many have gone over and beyond in some way or another to make a special impact on us. While we won't have a student in the district anymore, we will continue to support the district and look for ways to give back. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lee Pryor.
Hi. Thank you to anyone who is here to appreciate teachers. They need it. It's really hard to be a teacher anymore. Our current environment can be incredibly hostile to teachers. And this conversation needs to be a part of Teacher Appreciation Week, along with the much-deserved accolades. I taught in the classroom, mostly at Monroe Middle School, for 35 years in this district. I've seen my share of rough times, but I have never seen this much low morale, frustration, and fear in my fellow teachers. They put on a wonderful front and do an amazing job in spite of this, but they are struggling. Our teachers are not okay. What is happening here? Is it the secretive way the uniform grievance procedure is being implemented at the administrative level in the district? Is it some of the ridiculous Freedom of Information Act requests that use specious inquiries about specific teachers, causing rumors and false allegations to run rampant? Is it pushback as some of us work to deconstruct white supremacy, colonialism, and toxic masculinity? Is it our community's baseline of mistrust after COVID and ongoing fears about student safety, school shootings, and police shootings? Is it our addiction to inflammatory social media posts? I'm guessing all of these and more play a part in the ramping up of attacks on our teachers. The health of the community is reflected in its public schools, and the way we treat our teachers is a reflection of our community. It is wonderful to see so much support for our teachers. It is heartbreaking to see so much targeting of our teachers. How do we go about bridging this divide and start working to repair harm? Relationships are at the core of safety in our schools. We can reimagine how we treat each other. Embracing restorative justice and trauma-informed practices in our relationships, including our relationships with teachers, will lead to safety and healing for everyone. As a small step toward this goal, please attend the People's Lobby Restorative Justice Town Hall on Saturday, May 18th at 1:30 at the Community Center on Blanchard Road. We cannot continue to allow our public school teachers to be the repository for our collective frustration and fears. They don't deserve it. Let's work together to find a better way. And happy Teacher Appreciation Week to all of you wonderful, amazing teachers out there. You are deeply loved and appreciated by me and countless others.
Thank you, Ms. Pryor. Our next speaker tonight is Marianne Vitone.
Pass that down to Mr. Hanlon so he can share that with the board. Mary Ann Vitone, Wheaton, Illinois. Our taxes are due to come down in the next year, year and a half, when bonds are paid off. This district and board is looking to ask the community for $151 million in a referendum in November. Why so much? Because according to them, the community said so via their telephone survey, which is manipulated to give them the outcome they want and give the taxpayers no option to say no. Not to mention, we have to take them at their word because these surveys are not verifiable. Do our schools need some updating? Yes. Do we need a theater at Monroe Middle School in addition to Franklin and a new gym at Edison? No. Our middle schools can be cleaned up and look like new for a fraction of the cost. Like with Hubble, these over-the-top, expensive amenities do nothing to aid and improve the education of our students. Students at the new Hubble did not test any better than at the old Hubble. With what we spent on Hubble, we could have fixed all of our middle schools. The amount of frivolous, illegal expenditures I have brought to the attention of Dr. Schuler and the board has resulted in Dr. Schuler having no issues with frivolous spending and crickets from the board as to the legal public purpose spending of these expenditures. Article 8, Section 1 of the Constitution, requirement of a public purpose. Public funds are for public use, not for retirement dinners, golf outings, fashion shows, flowers, Yeti mugs, room service at the Drake, bundt cake, gifts, pizza for staff at Wheaton South for Pi Day, whirly ball for staff morale at Monroe. The list goes on and on and on with no oversight. I have brought this to your attention and nothing has changed. What I can say is, if we have all this discretionary money going to schools, thousands of dollars a month, spent on lavishing and in pampering themselves, that money should have gone to keeping our buildings maintained. The board has never voted not to increase parent fees, but has nothing to say about some of these disgraceful expenditures. Your silence has shown the community that you are not willing to do the right thing when it comes to being fiscal stewards of our money. You have no credibility to ask for more. Highest property taxes in the country, yet test scores falling every year with 50% of our kids only meeting proficiency in the basics they should be learning. This is abuse of taxpayer money, and it needs to stop.
Thank you, Ms. Fatone. Our next speaker is Harold Lonks.
Good evening. My name is Harold Longs. I am a resident of District 200. I was just going through the agenda for tonight, and there's a couple of items on here that I definitely agree with transparency. Number 12, there's a abnormal security email protection software. They talk about how it's going to be an expensive thing, but there's no price list on how much the contract's going to be in the agenda. And the next thing is the approval of the core network switches when they're going to switch out from a 10 gigabyte to 100 gigabyte circuits. So, as far as transparency and everything else, I think these agendas should include all the prices and what things are going to cost the taxpayers. And that's it. I also, I'm not a fan of raising going to a bond issue for $151 million. I know the schools do need some repairs. I know Franklin definitely needs a new roof and so on. So I think we got to go back and really just deal with the basics and look at the facilities and the actual real needs of the school versus building a new gym. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lonks. That's the end of public comment. We are on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Schuler.
Absolutely. So I'm going to start the superintendent report this evening by quick recognition of our student ambassadors, of which we have two with us today, Kaylee and Ethan. Tanat, Jacob, and Tomas not here this evening. I am absolutely certain, as I just look at the volume of what's going on at our high schools each evening, that they're incredibly busy. But I just want to start by thanking our ambassadors for stepping up into the opportunity this year. And a little over 2 weeks, they're going to be graduating from us. So next time you see them at June, as we anticipate hopefully a transition to new student ambassadors next year, they will officially be graduates of District 200, not seniors at District 200. And so with that in mind, I'm going to actually kick it right over to our student ambassadors, let them give their report, and then I'll come back with a few final thoughts. So, Kaylee, go ahead.
Hey, good evening, everybody. I think this is my last school update. So at South, we have prom coming up this weekend on Saturday. It's going to be hosted at the Q Center in St. Charles with the theme of Once Upon a Time. We've got the musical next week, Singing in the Rain. I have a personal friend, Mia Arco, starring in it. She's amazing. So is all the other actors. So that's going to be Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Our art show started today, and it's a great way to integrate arts into our curriculum. So shout out to all of our lovely art teachers and fine and professional art teachers. Senior week is rapidly approaching. Although senioritis is heavy, so is the excitement for the theme days, and I really appreciate how much work the staff has put into still making it fun for us, even though we're all ready to graduate, but we're excited to be at school right now. Badminton made it to state. Senior Veronica Kay will be competing there, I believe, this weekend. And they had a successful time at the DKC sectionals last night. Bass fishing made it to sectionals and competed, and they did well. Boys gymnastics are sectional champs, and they're going to state Saturday. And we already recognized the esports team tonight, but I'd like to personally say how proud I am to see how much spirit and joy they bring in. Speaking of the esports team, I'd like to end my report off by recognizing one of our distinguished educators that came from our building. He's right over there. Mr. Kieran Brennan. Mr. Brennan teaches business education at Wheaton South. I'm currently his student. Tomas has worked on him with the podcast. And I could talk for hours about how good of an educator he is, but I want to talk about what he means to Wheaton South. Mr. Brennan is like this bright light of positivity in a time when teenagers are angsty, sometimes a little mean, and sometimes a little much. He's just always there for everybody. Every kid who walks into his classroom feels special and feels like they belong there, and he's done so much for our community. So I think a Distinguished Educator Award is definitely appropriate for all of the work he puts in the classroom, but outside of the classroom, Mr. Brennan is the heart and soul of Wheaton South. We're very happy to have him, and we all love him. So thank you, Mr. Brennan.
Hey, Ethan, top that one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of similar things going on. We actually have had a lot of those things that she's been talking about that have happened in the past couple of weeks. So our prom happened, what was it? Last Saturday? Not this last one, but the one before. There we go. Gosh. Okay. And then we just wrapped up our musical, Mamma Mia. It was amazing. There's a lot of talent that goes into those shows. I mean, it's really crazy how talented these kids are. And then... oh, goodness. Okay, so our Ultimate Frisbee team actually just came from their game today. They're actually undefeated still. This team is brand new. They've been here for around 3 years. Most of the team's going to be seniors, so they'll be graduating. But it's been really exciting. Those games are actually really interesting. I did not know what Ultimate Frisbee was until this school year. But they were doing great today, so shout out to them. And then I haven't had too much to report on today. I could go on and on in my last reports, but I didn't know much about this meeting until about last week, and I wasn't sure that if these two were going to be here until a couple hours ago. So I tried my best to get something down, but yeah, I got to agree with Kaylee. There's a lot of senioritis going around for sure, but I'm definitely trying to fight that. But yeah, that's what I got for you today.
Awesome. Thank you, Ethan. So you heard mention from Kaylee the Celebrate Our Stars event. A huge thank you to the Student Excellence Foundation, WWEA, our Teachers Association for co-sponsoring that opportunity to recognize not only current educators that obviously have had an amazing impact on our students, but they recognize a former educator, Golden Star, that had a huge impact, as well as volunteers. So tremendous opportunity. We started this week in Staff Teacher Appreciation Week with our 1525 and retirement celebration that took place at Wheaton Warrenville South. Again, a huge thank you to the committee that took the time to plan and really celebrate our staff. It was really, really great. I did also want to just quick shout out just recently, our business incubator had their final pitch night, really 6 phenomenal groups, 3 from each of our high schools. Dr. O'Keefe was one of the judges for that, and I can't imagine how challenging that is. But again, really phenomenal job. Dr. O'Keefe, remind me the team name of the winners from Wheaton North. Muscle Melt.
Muscle Melt.
Yes. Thank you. Sorry. So Muscle Melt was the team that won. They're awarded a cash prize to continue incubating their business. And also just want a quick shout out, one of our teams that won that competition last year from Wheaton, Warrenville South, went on this week or last week to compete in a pitch competition at College of DuPage. They were second prize, earned $4,000 to continue to work on their business. So again, incredibly thankful for that opportunity. So lots going on as we come down to the final couple weeks of school. A lot of opportunities to recognize our seniors, our students that are transitioning across all levels. One of my personal favorites coming up is the opportunity for our seniors to return to their elementary schools to greet their teachers that they have grown up with. So lots to be proud and thankful for in the district. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Schuler. We're moving on to the consent agenda. So I'm going to read the items in the consent agenda. Those items include tonight the approval of high school novels, approval of grades 4 and 5 FLES curriculum content, approval of resolution of appointment of the district representative to the DuPage Area Occupational Education System, DAOES TCD Board of Directors for the 2024-25 school year, approval of the IHSA annual renewal, adoption of the Board of Education meeting calendar for 2024-2025, approval to increase paid lunch price, designation of interest earnings for fiscal year 2023-2024, approval of the resolution designating depositories, approval of the resolution appointing treasurer, approving the treasurer's bond and special issue bond for lease certificates, approval of the treasurer's and special issue bond coverage, approval to finance staff and student devices, approval of abnormal security email protection software, approval of core network switches, approval of bills payable and payroll, approval of minutes, April 10, 2024, regular meeting, open and closed, April 20th, 2024, coffee with the board session, open April 24, 2024, committee of the whole, open, and approval to destroy recordings of the closed sessions prior to December 2022 as allowable by law. Lastly, approval of personnel report to include employment, resignation, retirement, and leave of absence of administrative, certified, classified, and non-union staff. Board, are there any items that members want removed from the consent agenda? All right, hearing none. Dr. Schuler, any additional information?
Yeah, I just have two introductions. One I'm going to ask Dr. O'Keefe to make, one that I'm going to make off of our personnel report this evening. You're approving two new administrators this evening that will be joining us next year. So I get the pleasure of introducing Matt Epperly. Matt, if you wouldn't mind standing up. Matt will be the new assistant principal at Hubbell Middle School next year. So Matt, welcome to District 200. And Dr. O'Keefe, I'm going to let you introduce the
certainly, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Weisenberger, who's our Director of Facilities, so he can introduce Chuck to the whole group. Gavin, come on.
I'd like to introduce Chuck, who will be taking over from Colin on July 1st as our new Assistant Director of Facility Services. We welcome Chuck, who comes from DuPage County.
Thank you.
No additional information other than to mention is the case, especially off the bills payable list. Board members have an opportunity and do ask a lot of questions, just clarifying expenditure items. We did one request that I just was going to mention because I think a good idea, and we can certainly find the path to include it. A number of the items on your bills payable list every month that you're approving as expenditures actually have a funding source that sits behind them. In many cases, activity funds or other donation sources that are supporting especially a lot of our celebratory activities that may be purchased by PTA group or through donation. And so I think Mr. Jerpy had asked if we could find a path to just denote that somewhere on the bills payable list. You are still going to be required to approve that expenditure, but just for clarity so that folks understand most of those items are generously donated.
Thank you, Dr. Schuler. Board, any questions or comments? All right, hearing none. Board, I need a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Paulson,
Second.
second by Mr. Rutledge. Ms. Hutchison, will you please call the roll?
Yes.
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 Yes. We're on to the policy posting consent agenda. Again, these are 12 revised policies for approval to post for public review and comment. Policy, I'm going to read the policy numbers now. Policy number 2.40, 2.260, 2.265, 4.190, 5.10, 5.20, 5.300, 7.10, 7.20, 7.180, new policy 2.270, and rewritten policy 5.100. Board, are there any items that members want removed from the policy posting consent agenda? Hearing none. Dr. Schuler?
The policies that you're approving for posting this evening actually came through the most recent issue of Press Issue 114. These were reviewed by your HR Policy Committee that went through all of these at our most recent meeting, and they are all recommended for posting this evening.
Thank you. Board, any questions or comments? Hearing none. Board, I need a motion and a second to approve the policy posting consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Kulovitz, seconded by Mr. Long. Ms. Hutchison, will you please call the roll?
Yes.
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 Yes. We have one action item tonight, and it's the approval to move forward with the District 200 Safety and Security Upgrade Plan. Dr. Schuler?
Yeah, so just a little bit of context. The board will remember at your last committee of the whole meeting as a part of your comprehensive safety, security, SEL update. One of the items that Mr. Spencer reviewed with you at the end of that presentation was a list of security improvements, and actually the context of this goes all the way back to what was presented to the board as we were applying for a COPS grant. And we listed a number of items that were included in that grant application that had been prioritized both by our team within the district, reviewed by our safety committee within the district, and then were brought forward as a part of the COPS grant. We unfortunately did not receive the COPS grant, but I think at the board's request continued to move forward with exploration of those items. And so we, after the last committee, the whole meeting, we reviewed those again at our facility committee meeting, and with their urging our approval or bringing them forward to the board this evening for approval. So, Mr. Spencer, any additional context you want to add to that?
I wanted to point out that the board has an updated sheet in their green folders with the prices of what we expect this project to come in at. It is less money than what I presented at Committee of the Whole last month. That is because we decided to move our camera solution on premises, meaning it's not going to be cloud hosted. The reason for that is the quality of the cameras that we were testing on the cloud solution were nowhere near the quality of the on-prem solution. So the cameras are cheaper, higher quality, and we feel that we have more than enough backup space to handle that on-prem. So the overall price has come down on that. I also included on that sheet, I mentioned that some of these items will carry an ongoing subscription cost with them. The first subscription starts in fiscal year 26 with our guest management system. And then you can see all the way I've mapped out through fiscal year 30 some of the other products that also have digital subscriptions that are tied with them. Those being the digital panic alarms and the electronic door access. When possible, I quoted a 5-year subscription cost from the outset. So many of these subscription costs aren't seen for at least a couple of years. But just for transparency's sake, there will be a new budget item at some point for security costs because of these subscriptions.
Just one question. The 20,000 electronic door in fiscal year 30, could you explain that?
So with the door access, we pre-bought 5 years of licensing.
Okay.
So after 5 years, there will be a $20,000 ongoing subscription cost for that item.
Okay, thank you.
Can you just describe a little bit of the vetting by the safety committee that were these were the priority projects they identified?
Sure. So as part of the COPS grant, that process had to include all necessary people who had a say in safety and security. So our safety committee really did prioritize these particular items that you see on your list: video cameras, electronic door access, our night locks, which were added later, our panic buttons, our closed circuit TVs, and then all the network equipment that runs it all. As part of that COPS grant, we also had to consult with law enforcement, so they also advised where would be the best use of our money for physical security items. So there was a comprehensive list of people that were involved. We also engaged our complete district-wide EC12 admin team at one of our meetings, where they also rated their priorities, and we also engaged our Citizens Advisory Committee, where they also prioritized their needs as well.
Any other questions, board members?
Yes, if I could.
Just a comment. I very much think this is the right thing to do. The community feedback has been clear, and obviously we have the fund balance to support it. But it's hard not to recognize the fact that to a degree we're robbing Peter to pay Paul when we're looking at both fund balance deficits and operating budget deficits in future years based on admittedly conservative projections. So I think it's going to create some further challenges for us to solve down the road.
Mr. Rutledge?
Yes, question on the night locks. Can you explain what those do, what they are?
Absolutely. I can turn it over.
2,000 of them?
Yeah, I can turn it over to Mr. Biskin and Mr. Weisenberg, who actually have a model of what the night locks look like.
I thought maybe they were leaving when they were.
They can show you exactly how they work.
And then while they're getting that, for example, on the video cameras,
yes,
your note over there says pre-buy 5 years of licensing. I assume that is not included in that total cost of $456,000.
So what I should have, since we're on-prem, once you buy the camera for the solution that we're going with, there will be no licensing for the camera. Once you buy the camera, it comes with a license, and that's in perpetuity.
Okay, well, how about the next one then, the electronic door access?
Right, so
is that in
that is
addition?
that is cloud hosted, so we did pre-buy 5 years of that, and then starting in fiscal year 30 is when you see that $20,000 subscription cost.
Okay, so the $694,000 includes the first 5 years?
Correct.
Okay, good, thank you.
Mr. Biskin?
So Mr. Weisenberger was kind enough to create this model for us that we utilize with safety committee also. So based on the type of door, this is attached and secured to the door and then into the floor. This tool would be in a box near the door. This device would be used in case we had to lock down. So if you were in a classroom and you needed to immediately lock down, you would merely open up this box, take the piece, and put it in. So if the door pushed in, this would be attached. It would not be able to be pushed in or pulled out. Same thing with this, depending on the door frame. This would be inside of the box. You merely take it out, put it in the door jamb. The door cannot be opened. So this is much different than what we currently have, which at the time is what we had, and we made the absolute best out of it. There are actuators at the top of most of our doors, so we had cut fire hose that was able to be put over those, so if somebody tried to open that door, they couldn't. But in many cases, the doors are tall. It takes a lot of time. Teachers have to take their eyes away from students so they can get that done. This is a very simple model that can minimize the amount of time that teachers need to take in order to secure their door. and they can pay attention to students and make the decisions that are necessary during a lockdown for their safety. So that's how this works.
Thank you, Mr. Biskin. Any additional questions from the board? All right, thank you. Board, I need a motion and a second to approve the implementation of our safety and security upgrade plan as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Rutledge.
Well, I think you got to me first.
Moved by Mr. Long, seconded by
Second.
Mr. Rutledge. Ms. Hutchison, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So we have two oral reports tonight, the first of which is our middle school capital project discussion. Dr. Schuler?
Yeah, I'm going to hand it right over to Dr. O'Keefe and just give you the reminder as we do that consistent with kind of what we projected for the board. Everything that you're going to see tonight has been reviewed by either your Finance or Facilities Committee, or in some cases both Finance and Facilities Committee. But as we projected for the board, you've seen over the last couple of updates that we've done on the middle school concept plans, updates to the actual concepts themselves. We're going to move this evening into sharing with you cost estimates, phasing plans, and funding models that we've worked through. And again, just projecting forward, the anticipation is that all of this will come together at your June meeting with the entire concept-based concept plan. So, Dr. O'Keefe.
Thank you, Dr. Schuler. Good evening. As Dr. Schuler mentioned, we have three pieces for you tonight. We're going to walk through specifically the estimation of costs. We've got it by building in aggregate and then a breakdown by building, and those are within your packet. I've also included in your packet just a high-level summation of what it means by category, just to give you some perspective on our hard costs and our soft costs in totality. We are going to start with specifically the projections. Joe Papa-Nicholas, who is sitting to my left, is a partner at Nicholas & Associates. They are our construction management firm, the firm that helped us build Jefferson Early Childhood Center. Joe spent a lot of time, along with assistance from Perkins & Will, putting this data together, estimating where the data would go. So I'm going to turn it over to Joe just to walk through specifically what this looks like.
Thanks, Brian. Good evening, board. Is this close enough? All right, great. What I'd like to do is I'd like to start with the detailed budget assessment first and work our way back to the recap, if possible. If we could go to the next slide. There's quite a bit that goes into these structures, but basically our first task at this early onset is to create a preliminary budget assessment. So how do we create that? It starts with creating design components. So you'll see here with Monroe, we have 7 components. So from building demo to new addition, finishes, multiple levels of renovation, and then site work. All of those components make up the total amount of scope at Monroe. So the unit pricing that you see there, that's based on recently opened bids of comparable scope of work. So all these additions, all this renovation, all these site work projects in public K-12 that are ongoing on a monthly basis, we use that current criteria to establish reasonable placeholders to create this preliminary budget assessment. Okay. This leads to a total cost of construction. So in the Monroe case, you see the $31.7 million. From that point on, we then have a design contingency. So that design contingency, as the design is progressing, will disappear. And then we also have a construction contingency, which is included as a placeholder. So that will be carried over into the construction phase. That's for unforeseen conditions that we may encounter during the construction phase and or potentially owner added scope. That's it. That's what that mechanism is for. We built an escalation knowing that this is going to be a phased project over multiple years. That totals projected cost of construction. So our CM fee structure is the next number of line items there. That's based off of that projected cost of construction. So there's a builder's risk placeholder, general liability, payment and performance bond, CM fee structure, or CM fee. Fixed general conditions, so that's on-site supervision, project management, safety, things of that nature. Reimbursable general conditions. Again, we have another subtotal, which is total projected cost of construction plus the CM fee structure. And then the next line item you see is AE fee along with soft costs. So specialty consulting, furniture placeholder, asbestos abatement, commissioning, items such as that. And then finally we have the capital work. So this is an all-in. So all-in means that CM fee structure and AE fee, as well as the cost of the capital work, the hard cost of that work, is all inclusive. So we carried in that value as well, and that leads to our total project cost here at Monroe at $57.1 million. So we applied the same structure across all three schools that lead to the $151.5 million.
Can you define what CMP is?
Sure. That's purely just the construction management profit on the project, above and beyond fixed general condition costs. So just hard costs to do the work, that's purely profit.
Okay, and then the all-in capital?
All-in capital, those are the capital needs above and beyond what is being satisfied via the 7 components above.
So we had previously identified like the high priority, like condition 1, year 1 capital improvement items. These are items off of that original list that are not encompassed through the building renovation concept. So over and above things that are being touched. So it doesn't represent all of the items off of your capital improvement lists that are being addressed through this. But again, if you remember back to what was that low option in the original kind of 3 options, that low option where you're like absolute must do, should have done many years ago items that and again, these are only the percentage of that that's not overlapped with the building improvement projects.
Okay.
Makes
So
sense?
in other words, that's the Sherman-Durgis.
Sherman-Durgis, yeah. But I want to be careful in saying yes. I guess I want to be careful in saying that the misnomer that I do not want to create out in the community is that there's only $8 million of this project that comes off of Sherman-Durgis type projects. Again, everything that you're doing through not everything, but much of what you're doing through the improvement plan is we go into classrooms and we improve lighting, we improve flooring, we improve mechanical. That's all stuff that's included above in the renovation. That comes off your capital improvement list. So you're right, Brad, kind of that would be the traditional Sherman-Durgis, but out of this aggregate number of $150 million, you are addressing a significant chunk of what are items that are included in your capital improvement plan.
Those items would be spread out over realistically 5 to 7 years.
Could be.
So this number brings it forward into a 1 year, 1 package, much more efficient.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And then the finishes are noted as not having been, it's a new component since the previous budget assessments. Like,
Yeah. So what is that? Yeah. So that would be so when you see the concept plan again, if you think back to the last version of the concept plan that you saw, there were some color coded sections on the design where we highlighted some of the more significant areas of renovation in the building: science labs, performing arts space. As you look at the square footage in the building that's actually being touched through this renovation, it is really significant. At Monroe, there's not much of the square footage that you're not touching. So finishings, again, would be inside of every classroom in the building. You are addressing mechanical, floor, lights, the general classroom conditions that are going to improve learning. We call those finishings. So we added that scope into it.
Right, and I guess one more comment with regards to where we're at with the preliminary budget assessment. The whole idea, there is some conservativeness built into this. The idea, just similar like we did in Jefferson, is to refine the budget. As the design's progressing, we want to refine the budget. That's the whole idea. And ultimately, it'll lead to a final control estimate that we'll all review before we go out to bid.
Can you back up and just describe the fixed general conditions again for me, please?
Sure. So what makes up fixed general conditions? It's a product of the construction duration. So here for this exercise, it's 31 months of on-site supervision. So the day-to-day person that's responsible to coordinate all of the work. So on-site superintendent, project management, and then safety.
And for staff, have we benchmarked the fixed general conditions and also the CM fee?
We have, in fact, there was a placeholder for the CM fee. Mr. Papa-Nicholas and I had an interesting discussion last Friday afternoon related to that, and that in our original placeholder was at 4%. He was kind enough to talk through and move that down to 3%. From our perspective, that was actually $1 million move in our case. So yeah, we've fixed that against where the market's at, and in fact, we are not quite finished yet, but we did the same thing from the architectural fee side of things. I proposed in our original estimation, there was an 8.25% architectural fee. That number came down to a blended 7.67. In my most recent conversation with Perkins and Will, I proposed a 7%. We have a 7% held into here. I'm hoping we'll get to that number. This might put a little pressure on the gentleman sitting in this room to help us get to that point, but yeah, we are moving those conversations to make sure that where the market is at, we're at too.
I have a couple of questions looking at the placeholder that we reviewed last week and what we have today. I did recognize the drop in the CM fee, so thank you. And I appreciate the conservative approach. So in other words, we want to make sure we're not going to, say it's going to be 120 and it comes in at 160. What do? We'd rather be a little high. But I see that the contingencies have come down both on design and construction, and then conversely, the AE fee, specialty consulting, went up significantly. Can you just talk a little bit about that, please?
Certainly. So part of what is built into the overall cost, and when we look at it from an architectural perspective, we have basic fees for the architect, and there's a definition of what that means.
Yep.
We have pass-through fees, so these are all specialty consulting fees related to areas that are not part of basic services. So think of audiovisual, think of technical, think of sound related to auditoriums. Those areas, we spent time reviewing all of those, anticipated that some of the fees that were built into an estimate would not be needed. Further conversations brought back, yes, if we don't capture an allowance for this, it would not be captured within the bid documents. So we had to readjust in some of those cases. And then there's also the third is owner direct fees. So those are fees that we were paid directly out of our pocket. So imagine just an architect fee. We pay the architects directly. Consulting work, other types of work supporting the overall platform and the designs that are not included in basic services, we would call them Group B. So those go through the architect and come back to us. So you still pay for them. And then there are a third category of fees that come directly through us. They don't go through the architect. We had to adjust some of those areas to make sure that what we thought was in terms of allowances for dollars or something we had not provided in the previous scope were then captured therein, and had to adjust the contingency fees to ensure that we're staying at that $151.5 million, knowing that there's still a lot of conservative aspects to this, because when you look at specifically design contingency, construction contingency, and then our overall escalation, we're still at a number almost at $18 million of a $96 million anticipated construction cost. So there's still flexibility built into this platform.
Right, yeah. Okay, good. And so just in terms of process as we move forward from here towards June, and then ultimately when we vote on, should we expect that these numbers will continue to be refined until that point, and then we would kind of be on hold with that until we actually start the design? Is that kind of the process?
I'll answer and then turn to Joe and make sure I don't say something that I shouldn't. But I certainly, every week we're refining the conversation around these numbers. I don't think there's going to be any significant movement between now and then. I think it's when we actually get into deep design, both with phase one and as we'll talk about in our scaling here. Phase 2 and phase 3 is where the deep dive goes into specific overall costs. Is that fair?
That's fair. So potentially we could be to an enhanced schematic design stage, which is still very early in the overall design phase. So like Brian said, there certainly there'll be some internal refinement, but nothing substantial at that point until we get deeper into the design, where I can comfortably reduce this high nature format eventually transfers over into a very detailed estimate.
Yeah, and so kind of related to that, all the top part has dollars per square foot. Would you consider those numbers to be conservative, or are they industry expected numbers? I mean, would we expect some room?
That was one of the reasons I was comfortable reducing the design contingency a little bit, because those the component placeholders are conservative enough where I felt it was okay to reduce that. So just to put things in perspective, the last couple dozen additions and renovations with site per square foot all in range from $700 to over $1,000 a square foot. So certainly there's economies of scale with what we have here. So we're starting out in that 700 to 800 a square foot range.
Okay.
So,
all right. Thank you very much.
I can
Go
follow
ahead,
up just a
go
little. So I appreciate being conservative in the numbers, because I'm not sure what it would look like if there was a shortfall, like if we didn't have enough come time to go forward with the projects. But how do we safeguard against, like, if we go to referendum and we say 151 million, but we really don't end up needing that much? But I feel like once you have a number out there, it's like you use it or you lose it. And how do we safeguard against that mentality? Like that, we've got $151 million, we're going to spend it.
Yeah.
Versus, like, it might come in at 140, we could do it at 140, but we got that extra load. Like, how do we protect against that?
Yeah, so I think two things. Go ahead, Joe.
I guess what I would say, the only way to zero in is to get the design underway. So once we get to, let's just say, the 75% stage of the design, at that point, we're really close to where the work more than likely will come in on bid day. But where we're at now and high level, again, this is based on recently open bids, so it's reasonably conservative.
So I think the second part to that, though, is the project is ultimately going to go out to bid. And when it goes out to bid, the bids that come in that are accepted by the board are ultimately going to define what your final borrowing structure is built on. So you are not going to borrow more than what you need. So even if there's a number, so your referendum question is going to include the cost, the projected costs, and it's also going to include what are you improving, what are you doing, and you're not going to exceed that. So if you take it out to bid, I think as Dr. O'Keefe goes through a couple of different scenarios related to that, what you'll see are actually a couple of different options, and one that actually is designed to some degree to kind of help with that, where perhaps the borrowing would actually take place in two phases that coincide with when bids are open so that you do not borrow more than what you need. So if you take this out to bid and the final number comes in at 140, you're going to borrow 140, right? That's what the community is going to be, is going to pay for. We're not going to go back in and add $10 million worth of scope.
So I think where your head is, like, if we don't use the contingency, what happens?
You don't spend it.
Right.
Yeah. So if you don't need the contingency, that number falls off. The project is $1 million cheaper than what's in here right now.
Okay. And just for my knowledge, with this type of project, are we required to accept the lowest bid?
Yeah.
I would say lowest responsive bidder.
Right.
And there'll be criteria built within the bid documents that defines if somebody fits into that category and they're just bidding to win business. If they don't qualify,
That was my, okay.
for based on what's written into the bid documents, then you would have the ability to disqualify them from the process.
Okay, thank you.
And you have a lot. The good news with the project that is this large is there's a lot of expertise on the team that's supporting you. So even that process of vetting bids, right, there's a lot more eyes and knowledge on determining that the individuals are responsive bidders.
I would just like to ask if there are firm bids, what's the likelihood of finding conditions in the course of construction that might lead to additional costs, unexpected things, whether it's soils conditions or something else? I've always been reluctant to say, well, we've got a fixed contract here, and that's the end of it.
Right. Well, with regards to soil, that's a good example. We're going to we'll coordinate a geotech service, and we'll do soil borings. We'll do sampling.
Okay, but so you're saying that there's not any possibility of something coming along that would escalate the cost?
Oh, absolutely. So the construction contingency there is to handle an unforeseen condition such as some unsuitable soil. Soil borings are only as good as that particular location. So we'll certainly make provisions within the bid packages to accommodate unsuitable soil if we do happen to encounter that.
So if we do have a contingency that's not used because we didn't find bad soil, then we do have a little excess left over at the end of the project. And
Yes.
the question is, what happens to that excess that's left over at the end of the project?
You're just not going to spend it. So you are only going to borrow what you need to pay for cost of construction. So that is not put on the taxpayer.
So we would not issue the bonds until all the costs are incurred?
No, not in all of it. Hang tight on that, John, until we at least maybe get into the bonding scenarios, and it might bring a little bit of clarity for you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So first off, the structure of this budget is something that through the facility committee I've been very focused on, and I think it's well conceived. Joe or Brian or Joe, can you talk a little bit about what the construction industry economics have been the last 4 or 5 years, just as a frame of reference for the board?
Sure. Generally speaking, it's a new school, brand new school, all in would be just under $400 a square foot. So right now, similar scope of work, it's probably around $600 a square foot. Same building. So cost of construction's gone drastically up since 2020. That particular school that I just referenced, we bid that in the spring of 2020. The actual pre-bid meeting I remember was in April of 2020. We bid it shortly thereafter, and we broke ground, and that was under $400 a square foot all in. And right now we're about 600 square foot for the same school, which we're in the process of finalizing the budget. We'll be going out to bid in a few months on that. So that's just kind of high level of where the cost of construction has gone over a relatively short period of time. And also demand, materials, labor, and then demand have all gone up.
And just to Julie's question earlier about fees, these are within market, so I'm comfortable that our team's gone through the right process.
Thank you.
All right, you want to move forward?
So next up, if we wouldn't mind scrolling down till we get to the PMA side of things. PMA is your municipal advisor partner. They've worked with the district for an extended period of time. If in fact we were able to move forward, had positivity out of the referendum, and then had to go out and issue bonds, PMA would be your advisor in the marketplace. And what they've put together for you are just two different scenarios. And I'll start with, it's not a recommendation. It's not what we expect. The market changes every single day. But again, using conservative construction estimated costs at a high level, we at least wanted to show the board what a couple different borrowings could look like. And on the second side of things, I'll jump into why it may be beneficial to the board to consider something else than a full borrowing all at once. So a few key assumptions built into this. This would be for referendum this coming fall. This was taking existing market rates and adding 25 basis points to it. As we've all heard, we potentially all at some point expect the Fed to look at the overnight rate, which is a borrowing rate between banks, and if our cost of goods, so cost increases, our CPI, if that does come down a little bit in the future, it's possible that overnight reduces. When that reduces, Treasury bonds typically would reduce. The cost to borrow an automobile, mortgage a home, things like that would come down. So the Feds are predicting over the next 2 full 24 months, somewhere between 4 and 5 reductions in the overnight rate of 25 to 50 basis points. So we're not building that into a conversation here. We're saying if today held still plus 25 basis points, this is what a borrowing of $51 million can look like. Two pieces to it, so two assumptions just from a reference perspective. One, all-in borrowing next year. Two would be a scenario where, in essence, we would borrow half the money in 25, half the money in 27, which very well could be more likely what things look like, especially if we anticipate, certainly there's risk to it, but we anticipate that interest rates would drop over time. So we may advise the board, we want to hold off if we don't need all the money up front. We may want to hold off on this on a second borrowing because the cost would actually reduce over time. Certainly in the tax bill, just using this, it's about on a single dollar financing, looking at how it would be put out, we're about a $36 savings per year on an average median home. I'll get to that and show you that. And then certainly the timing all depends on when it's necessary to have the significant first amount of capital in. If we wouldn't mind going to the next one.
Hey, Brian.
Yes, sir.
I just want to emphasize that $36,
yep,
just to make sure it's clear. That's the difference between the two financing options. Yes.
Correct.
Nothing about current tax rate.
So here, first set, all-in borrowing tied to levy year 2025. So the years at the bottom are levy years. Our 2022 levy was near $19 million in total. The 23 levy that you approved last December, which is included in all of our tax bills that are coming out this month, with your $2 million abatement that you approved also at the same time of the levy, is $14.3 million. Your levy 24, which at this point in time would be the last levy you would need to approve, which has a bond and interest payment attached to it. Again, that would be this coming November, December, is right around the same dollar amount, $14.3 million. That last debt payment, just purely from a public perspective, happens on October 1st of 2025. But any of the proceeds collected from levy 24 would be applied to that payment. And as we noted back when we were having a discussion with you about proceeds that we thought would be in excess in the bond and interest fund, that certainly $2 million abatement takes that into account. There also may be still some excess that we can have a conversation about in the future, but not injecting that potential option into here. $151 million borrowing over a 20-year period would actually have an annual loan payment of about $11.8 million. So that $2.45 million difference is about an 18% drop in what the levy 2024 would be to levy 2025. Constant throughout the next 20 years. This would be a referendum bond. This would have no impact on DSEB, which is a borrowing option that the board would still carry in case anything significant happened within the community. DSEB is not something that requires that it go out to referendum unless there's some triggers that could actually be hit. But from this perspective too, if you look at 11.8 million consistent over 20 years, the actual percentage of the overall levy from a debt and interest perspective will shrink as time progresses because your operating levy is going to increase. So while the dollar amount stays the same over a 20-year period in this scenario, the actual percentage of the levy attributed to debt will decrease over time. Nice, flat, consistent. Looks very, in some instances, different from what our levy payments have looked like in the last year, but nice one-time issuance, 20 years. There's specifically what it looks like. If you go to the next page, This is just some more detail into what the dollars mean, and it just reinforces everything that I've already mentioned. This is detail certainly for the board or for the audience if they like. The second scenario that I will bring up, that is an option if we move to the next page again, please, is if we were to do this twofold. So again, why would we consider a twofold distribution instead of a single? One, all of these projects are in phases. So it's not as if we are bringing every bid package out to the public at the same time, asking you to approve all those and having to fund all those big packages immediately. This is a phased concept of what we're looking at, 3 phases right now. So it may make sense for the board to look at multiple issuances. In this example, 76 million would be issued first, so half of what we're projecting, that's in the green, with some higher payments related to that issuance up front. So we have consistency throughout in terms of the leveling of debt payments. The blue would be a second issuance of 75 million in 27. We are not forecasting anything different in terms of interest rates between all these. This is using the market rate plus 25 basis points from last week. So that issuance would allow us then capital needed for potentially phase 1 and moving into phase 2 of the project, and then finishing up with a second issuance to take care of the rest of phase 2 in phase 3. It is highly possible that interest rates could be lower, and if we took this approach, but we're not making the assumption that it would be, but that would actually be an idea around a multiple issuance if there's some forecasting that would tell you if you wanted to wait on borrowing, if interest rates are lower, that means all long-term costs are lower.
So,
Is that 25 bips related to risk or to just a contingency in case rates go up?
It's just a conservative estimation of where a rate could be, roughly a year, if not a year or more than now.
Okay, so
It's quite possible we're going to be in a much different environment, especially if the overnight rate is adjusted by the feds. But just conservative approach to what it could be.
Thank you.
Yep.
would the 2 bond option be done in one referendum question, or would you have to ask in 25 and in 27?
Nope, it's all in one question, because what you are asking is for an aggregate dollar amount within the question to specify the projects as a whole. That gives you the authority to issue up till that amount, but we have the ability to look at what might happen in the market or what is happening in the market and strategically plan how those issuances look.
Doesn't the 2-phase also help us when you borrow the money, when we issue the bonds and get it, we have a certain amount of time
Yep.
that has to be spent.
Correct. From when proceeds are received from a bond issuance, you have 3 years of time to spend that money.
Yeah. So if we had some delay for some unforeseen reason, this second option also gives us that flexibility.
Correct. It could assist with
to
that.
not get in
Correct.
trouble with that part of the.
Yep. Yeah, I think when we're talking about an issuance, and as you'll see here shortly, groundbreaking not occurring until the fall of 25 at the earliest, I think that gives us a pretty good window, but it doesn't mean that we're probably substantially completed by the time the school year starts in 28, 29, but maybe not all completed. So yes, this might help us with the phasing from a timing perspective. One thing noted on here too, just because this is a dual issuance, so each of these issuances are for 20 years, but a 22-year period in totality, which is why you would see the average annual payment at $1 million less than a single option itself. We're going to get to a page where it shows you all-in costs here in a second. The difference between option 1, now again, it's an option for discussion, not a recommendation. 20-year time frame that would end in 2046 levy. This would actually end in 20-year 48 as your last levy payment year, because first issuance 20 years, delay it for 2 years, second issuance another 22 years. If we move to the next page, there's some more detail behind what this looks like as a whole, and as we progress along to the next page, this would be almost a $3.4 million difference that we're looking at on an annual basis between levy 24 and levy 25. It's almost a 25% difference between the levies. So the reason I mention that is we are not designing or discussing to an amount. We are looking at the conservative aspect of what these projects could cost knowing that we anticipate any borrowing is going to be what I would describe, if we get to 25%, a substantial difference year over year as we move forward in that. The last page here actually will get into total cost, just to show you an idea of where it'd be at. If you guys would scroll down one more page, please. So the first example, that's the column there on the left, an estimated total accrued interest rate of about 4.43%, all-in cost of about $236.6 million, an average annual debt service of 11.8. You can see final payment there in 2046. In this specific example, it would be a 7%, a 7-cent reduction in the tax rate on the bond and interest side of the levy, meeting a $90 annual savings to a median homeowner, and that value has changed again. That's actually up to, if you recall, we used a number north of $380,000 when we were discussing this in the past. This is an average median home value of now almost $404,000 based on some updates from the marketplace. So about a $90 per year savings in scenario one. Scenario two is a little bit higher, spread out a little bit lower, but total costs are within $400,000 of each other. So it's not one option or the other is right or wrong, not a recommendation tonight. But what this will do, and I think hopefully point out to the board and to the public, is that if in fact you move forward with a referendum recommendation, you ask for a specific dollar amount, it will give you flexibility on how we approach those borrowings.
And a decision on this would come much later?
Much later.
Yep. Thank you.
Hey, can you go back to the two bond issue chart, vertical bar chart?
One more page after this, guys.
So is that implying that the first bond issuance in light green is front loaded for debt service payment?
Correct.
Okay.
Front loaded in the first 2 years, yes.
Okay. And then the second bond issuance would be back loaded?
Correct. So that we have leveling or consistency throughout a time frame.
22 years.
Yep.
Level.
Yep.
Okay.
10.8 million over 22 years.
And the idea of one of the benefits I would think of two bond issuances would give future boards more flexibility if refinancing opportunities came up as opposed to one big one. Okay. Which is something we've done a lot as a board.
And certainly from a refinancing perspective, there will be specific refinance dates that are defined within the issuance. So we will know the first specific moment in time that we'll be able to refinance. Typically, that is not short term. That's 5, 7, 9 years out from issuance. But certainly we can have a conversation about what might be interested, what the board might be interested in. That might factor into the overall cost of the borrowing, though. Certainly the interest rate.
So Brian, if we're just looking at the two bond scenario, it's about $36 difference on average, just as a metric.
Yep.
Can you talk about the puts and takes or the reality of going to a three bond issue? Does it make sense? Realistically, it makes no sense.
It may. I think part of that driver is going to be where's the interest market moving? Where has it moved when you issue first? And then where do we think it's going? So there is some risk to continuing to spread out your issuances because the market could turn right around and all of a sudden something that you thought might be less expensive could be more expensive as a whole. So there is risk to the board from a financial perspective, but indications, at least from the feds at this point, is that over the next 24 months, rates will come down, which will make that overnight rate less expensive, and certainly rates that come from the 20-year Treasury we would anticipate being lower, less expensive. I don't know if 3 is the right place to go yet. It's way too early in the process, especially since we're looking at really a 3+ year time frame in terms of overall construction. It may not make sense from that perspective because you may need the bulk of that money on if you were to look at 2 issuances sooner than later. But it's something we'll take into
consideration. The finance committee and the team could take a look at. That'd be helpful.
Of course.
I have a question.
I'd like to ask if there's any, I'll say economies of scale. Is there any threshold below which our interest rate is going to be higher because of the cost of issuing I'm assuming there's some fixed costs in issuing bonds, and with 2 issues, we got double that cost of issuing. is there some point at which it does not make sense to issue two?
I don't have that answer yet because I don't know what the cost would be. We're too far in advance of estimating it. I would say certainly just because you have two issuances doesn't mean your costs double, because there are some economies of scale in planning from that perspective too, and those issuances typically costs in some cases are related to the amount of the issuance overall too.
I think that would be worthwhile information
Absolutely.
for us to have as
Absolutely.
we get closer to deciding that. And one thing I've learned over a lot of years is you don't bet on which direction interest rates are going to
True.
go. That's a losing proposition.
Yeah, certainly from an advisement perspective, we're not going to be in the we're not going to be in the market of betting on where we think it's going to go. We're going to use the information that's at our fingertips and make some solid assumptions that we can have a conversation about.
Thank you.
I have two questions. So if we were not doing this, like come next year, the average taxpayer would see a decrease in their tax payment. So if we did the two bond scenario, they would save $36 a year, but extending it 2 years. So that chunk that they would be saving, or I guess I'm trying to say, like, those 2 years they're going to be paying not just $36. Do you see what I'm kind of saying?
So in these two specific scenarios, there's a $36 savings per year, which is directly tied to the time frame associated with the debt.
But it's 2 extra years of paying that difference between what
Correct.
they'd be paying versus like that chunk
Correct.
being your rate versus nothing. So
Scenario one is a
is
20-year
that-
time frame.
So is that really
Yep.
a $36 a year savings? Or, I mean, because you kind of would have to play it out. Like,
Well, total dollars, as you saw, still come out to be almost exactly the same over the 22 years as it is over the 21 years. So it could be that there are still savings in those out years, but yet what's also happened too is we've reduced payments in scenario two from $11.8 million a year to $10.8 million a year, but the total value of 22 years is almost exactly the same in this scenario in terms of cost as the total value of scenario one.
same in terms of cost to the taxpayer.
Total cost, yes.
So I kind of agree with John, like, because it's a little bit of a risk knowing where the interest rates are going to be. Is there any thought of doing scenario one and then refinancing at the point at which interest rates drop? Like, is
Always.
that, okay.
Anytime we have the opportunity from a strategic perspective, if the notes give us the ability, so the bonds give us the ability to refinance, we always look at it. We're always testing the market on where it's at. There's a recommendation to refinance because the market is softer than what the interest rates that are in place, then absolutely.
And is the cost significant? Because to me, then I would think, why take the risk if
I
like,
think
what's
you
the
go,
benefit?
yeah, that's a fair question, and there are a lot of people that have a lot more specific expertise than me. But in most cases, bonds have a call date, so they will have a set date in which you can refinance that bond, and it's so I think the difference would be if in the 2 years after that first issuance, interest rates are lower, but you may not be at your call date yet, so you can't take advantage of that for a window of time. So if you potentially believe in, like year two, that there's already a reduction in interest rates, you probably would be better in the aggregate to split it into two, because you're probably not going to be at your call date yet where you could refinance.
How typical, like, what's the typical length of a call date? Or is it depending?
I haven't seen anything less than 5 years. I think we get into 5, 7, 9, 10. Part of it just depends on the structure that we would like to put in place with the bonds, because a sooner call date has potentially some additional cost from a risk perspective built into it by those that are interested in purchasing the bonds. So the upfront interest rate may be a tick higher because we want a call date sooner than what the market normally sees.
Thank you.
So this is not really a financing question. It's just an observation. I think there's another layer of cost savings that this whole program provides to us. So we talked about the $25 million of all-in capital costs. That's pull out of Sherman, even more than that, pull out of Sherman Durgis and implemented in this program, it frees up our operating budgets for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years to capture all the other stuff that would be on those out years, pull it forward on all the other schools we have. So we'd be doing a lot of that work many, many years earlier, which would be cost savings as well.
Yep.
And continued or earlier impact and benefit to the other schools and the other students.
Yeah, certainly the flexibility of a bond issuance specific to the middle school capital projects allows the Board of Education to still consider on an annual basis capital needs in our elementary schools and at our high schools. If those dollars are not available through referendum, it will significantly alter what our priorities are going to be, where our focus more than likely will shift to nothing but Sherman Durgis and middle schools for an extended period of time.
All the other 21 schools, 20 schools get pushed back, 17 schools get pushed back.
It's quite possible we can't finish flooring on the elementary side. We have to take a different look at roofing. We have to take a different look at other upgrades that we've traditionally done each summer. Yeah, that's certainly we're going to take care of anything that's in dire need, but anything that is something we would like to finish that isn't in dire need, specifically, we'd have to push to the back of the line.
Yeah, we get different choices. Yep. Future boards, future years get different choices. With this.
Correct.
All right, let's move into the last little piece. If we could scroll down.
Yep. So I'll bring in and introduce Michael Dolter, Senior Project Architect with Perkins & Will. So Michael and his team have been responsible for all of our concepts and putting together a specific assumption. This is a baseline assumption that has come out of the facility committee. We'll give you an idea on specifically time frame overall, and then how we plan on moving forward if in fact the board is ready to move forward from here. Michael?
Great. Good evening. Again, Mike Dolter, Senior Project Architect with Perkins & Will. Great to be here tonight, talk through some of our project schedule approaches for the middle school improvements. So as you may remember, previous time being before you, there were several different approaches that we had put on the table of from very conservative to very aggressive schedule potentials here. We've worked through what those may be, and we're presenting here what is called the new updated baseline assumption for the project. This is based upon the concept of getting a result of early construction as possible, so that we can take advantage of some of the reduced escalation as well as reduced overall project cost impacts. And using that as a baseline for how to move forward with the design process, the design bidding process through here. So, if we look at the phase 1 line, which is the third line in here, it really starts to illustrate what is the essentially the earliest time in order to get a phase 1 project started. The phase 1 projects have been identified at each one of the schools as the major building additions, those are the initial projects. They have the highest capital outlay, as well as they have the highest impact on the ability to move other programs within the school around to accomplish the work that needs to be done through there. So they're very good enabling projects for future work that would happen over the course of the summers for the project. So that target is really starting in September 2025. That's the dark magenta dot that's in September of 2025 on that third line. That says bidding and construction really starts at that point. Backing out from that, we have the light green line that shows that there is design work that would happen from the date of a successful referendum passage in November of 2024. But we know that there needs to be additional design work that would happen in order to accomplish that September date in 2025. So that darker green line on line 2 is enhanced schematic design. That takes place prior to the referendum. So there would be a portion of the design work that would need to take place ahead of a finalized referendum, in addition to the work that we're currently doing, that is program verification and concept design. So that program verification concept design line 1, that's intended to really give a further understanding of what the overall scope of the project is. We're having continued discussions with the users at the schools. We're having engineering discussions and review of the existing buildings and potential future approaches to those. That wraps up in the June-July timeline of this year. So with the presentation that will be made to the board in June to bring together the entirety of the project as the vision is at that point. So in order to hit that mark on September 2025, there is some additional design work that would be anticipated to be needed before the referendum question in November. Onwards from that, the anticipation is that first phase work, the major building additions, would continue on through the 2025-2026 school year, with them coming online at the semester break 2026-2027. So January ish of that time frame. So you can see there's a little dash line after that that indicates that there's a potential that there may be some additional site work or associated projects that would continue at that time. We'd also anticipate that we would be designing and bidding out some associated work or independent work that would take place during the summer of 2026. Want to make sure we're taking advantage of all the summers that we have available to us to layer on as much work as possible. This is a good opportunity to have independent projects that are not directly associated with other projects that are in the domino of the major projects to take place at that time, or other enabling work that needs to be done on the site or around the buildings. The phase 2 and phase 3 projects, those are shown right now as separated into two different distinct design phases and two different distinct construction phases. The anticipation is that we'll have a summer 2027 work and summer 2028 work that would be completed under phases 2 and 3. There is a potential that the design and bidding for that work could be bundled together to realize some additional bid savings. What we're showing is a broken apart strategy depending on what the economy looks like at the time, what the bid strategy looks like at the time. It may make sense to break that out and do that at two separate occasions. It may make sense to bundle that together to get more additional economy of scale at that point. So this is more of a conservative approach looking at extending out that design schedule, extending out the bidding schedule. But as Joe was saying earlier, we have a series of cost control measures built in, working with Nicholas and Associates throughout the design process, so that we understand where we sit on an overall project basis, not just individualized to each one of those phases that will be developed throughout the entire project. So we're still hitting a target, and by the time we reach a phase 3 implementation, we still have the money to do that work. So if we look at sort of the cost benefit of moving additional design ahead of the referendum, you can see here in the bottom there's an initial investment pro-con chart there. The initial investment that would be anticipated before there would be the work through the schematic design for phase 1. Any additional budget estimating associated with that. Geotechnical investigations at all the sites, that is the soil investigations at each site. Site surveying, so having a survey done of all the sites, as well as additional consultant costs associated with the design. The benefit from that, again, as we discussed, is minimized project escalation. So we reduce the window of escalation by bringing construction up early. We know that there's a distinct cost to pushing construction off to a later date that's quantifiable based on current anticipated escalation rates, as well as improved labor rates over time. And then the early projects allow for that swing space to develop future projects and really move that. Some of the challenges that could occur, and these are all crystal ball challenges, are really looking at a late summer, early fall construction start. Not the most ideal time to start it. If it moves at an accelerated rate and weather is favorable, there may not be any impact to that. There is already some anticipated winter conditions that have been built into the budgeting process. Depending on what the weather is of the time, that may have an impact on the project overall. We'll have to see what that looks like. And then mid-year online of a building, not the best time to do it, but also not a terrible thing, since we'll still be able to swing out of the existing spaces into there. And then there is an additional cost to that design service that would happen between the June-July timeframe and November here as well. I'll say that additional cost there, that is just depends on where it is within the design process. If you decided not to make an investment until after the referendum question was successful, that would still be cost that you would realize at that time. So there's no additional cost to the overall process here. It's just shifting that cost ahead of that question date. So happy to field any questions.
In doing that, we would expect the total project cost to be lower.
We would expect to be able to get additional value from the project because we're moving construction earlier. So we're reducing the impact of escalation on the project, so we get additional value from that.
Can you talk a little bit about the disruption to the classroom setting during construction and how that's managed?
Sure. So the main timeline for most of the work is going to be during summers. But we realize that the building of new construction, new additions at all three schools takes longer than that. So the idea is to isolate any construction work that's happening to those areas of campus, minimize the impact on students around those spaces. These are generally isolated from that. There will be some, it's construction on a school site, so there is always going to be visible action that's happening. But through the process here, we anticipate that it's going to be minimized. Generally speaking, students are fairly resilient when it comes to that. If there will be a need to shift some student movement in some areas to avoid any of the construction zones, but it shouldn't have a significant impact on the educational environment. There won't be any anticipated construction within the buildings when buildings are occupied in the surrounding areas outside of the building addition areas. Anything that would happen in the building would be in an isolated area that would be away from active classes.
I have a question. So I understand that this enhanced schematic design, the dark green there, is money that could be appreciated after the potential approval of the referendum. But if the referendum is not approved, where does that come from? Right.
That'll come from your fund balance
Okay. And so
as a whole.
What kind of, like, what's the
So the
amount of
the
that?
yellow we're estimating at around $500,000. That's work that has to be done in order to give you what you need to be able to make a decision as we bring the total package to you next month. The dark green is estimated to be around $1 million investment. Certainly, if we move forward, as Michael said, you're going to spend that $1 million. One of the things that we've noted is by moving up the project by roughly 6 months, we would anticipate roughly $1 million savings by starting construction 6 months earlier than 6 months later. One of the reasons then of bringing it up, getting to the market sooner, potentially realizing some cost savings by starting sooner. Plus, realistically, there may be a lot of referendum dollars that are out in the market in November and potentially over the next few years. So the sooner we can get to a point where we can move forward and get a firmer estimate and understanding of costs and where labor's at, where the market's at, hopefully we get in front of some other folks that could be in the market too. But in the end, whatever is done, you own. So whatever work happens belongs to the school district. It's owned by the Board of Education in the school district. It's not a sunk cost unless specifically, let's say a referendum doesn't pass, you decide to do nothing. You decide not to move forward at all. with anything at the middle schools. If the referendum doesn't pass and we have to look at a different mechanism of how to approach the middle schools, you've already made the investment, the designs are yours. We just begin working from there.
I think that's an important thing too, that if sooner or later this work will have to get done and the design work will be done. So we'll have that in hand.
Right. And some of that design work does address those must-have or must-need capital improvement projects.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Just to reinforce what Brian said, I think we've talked about this at the facility committee meeting. I'm pretty confident there's going to be a tremendous amount of school construction and park district construction on the ballot in November across Chicagoland. And the benefit, and we talked about this at length, the benefit of that dark green bar is gets us the opportunity to bid before everybody else is going to be in the market. Hopefully with good marketing towards the trades, we can get in the door and get good prices and get good contractors. So there's I think there's going to be a tremendous benefit to hit the construction mark with some pretty big portion of the project next late summer, early spring, fall next year, as opposed to waiting into the winter, which what a lot of people do.
Any additional questions, board? All right, thank you. Our second oral report tonight is the Vision 2026 Career Pathways and Technology Center of DuPage programs. Dr. Schuler.
I'm going to hand it right to Mrs. Murphy.
Ms. Murphy.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to have an opportunity to speak to you about student learning tonight, especially about our important Vision 2026 strategic work connected to career pathways. Very timely tonight that we would talk about TCD, especially after the recognition of some students this evening. I think I'm as close as I can get. So I have 3 guiding questions for you this evening, and I'm going to start with the first one. What is DEOS and what is TCD? So there are 14 member districts that are involved in DEOS. And each member district has a representative for the board of directors. Tonight you approved your representative, which is me. So I'm excited to be able to serve in that role again for the 2nd year. So DEOS is, it has a mission of providing and preparing students for career opportunities, specifically 2 areas. Planning for the delivery of career and tech ed education for our DuPage area, and then second, operating the Technology Center of DuPage, or TCD, and that is a program for juniors and seniors. So DEOS does receive funding for career and tech ed. That grant for the 14 districts is managed through DEOS. District 200 receives an allocation for our students, and we create the local budget for those grants. So we have a state grant, and you can see the fiscal year 24 allocation that we received there, $90,748, and then the federal grant, which is Perkins, you can see our grant allocation, $47,109. So Technology Center of DuPage offers career and tech ed programming for juniors and seniors. It has 18 different programs that we're going to talk about tonight. The campus is located in Addison. I know many around the board table here have had the opportunity to visit the campus. It's very impressive. If you haven't had that chance, it's worth the visit. Each school district does pay a tuition for the students that attend, and we provide transportation. So what programs are offered at TCD, and how have our students accessed those programs? So there's 18 programs, so they're listed on the next 2 slides. And you can see here I included the District 200 enrollment for last year for each program, this year for each program, and then what is projected for next year. That's not quite finalized, but those are what we anticipate being the enrollment for each program. And here's the second set of the the second slide with the rest of the programs here. So you can see there's a significant increase in interest from the District 200 students in attending TCD next year. So last guiding question, how do these programs connect to our career pathways? The board may remember seeing this slide back in February. This is an overall, it is an overview of career pathways. And so the ultimate goal of career pathways is the red area there, where students could earn an endorsement on their transcript from the State Board of Education. We had our students last year that earned that for the education pathway. We're anticipating more coming as well. So that's the ultimate goal. But to get that endorsement, you have to do everything in the dark blue. And so that means you have to have a career exploration activities. You need to take a sequence of connected courses along a pathway. You need to have early college coursework, which is either AP or dual credit. And you need to have work-based learning, which is 60 hours. The two light blue areas are not a requirement for the endorsement, but we value here with District 200. It's an industry credential and aligned co-curriculars. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through the next couple of slides, really focusing on one of those columns in the overall programming as it connects to TCD. So the first one really is career exploration. Because DEO's responsibility is for career education across the 14-member schools, they take a lead in planning activities for middle school students and high school students. So on this slide, you're going to see those opportunities that they've offered in the fall and the spring. Our students did take advantage of these opportunities. Our middle school students attended these, and high school students attended these as well. Work-based learning is really the ultimate goal of career exploration, and so several of the TCD programs have work-based learning as a part of that learning experience for our students, but there are already some that are built in, and then there are some that are in development as well. Early college coursework, this is pretty exciting. For a majority of the programs, TCD offers dual credit through College of DuPage. And what this does look like is students could attend up to 2 years at TCD. They could then move on to 2 years at COD and then even continue on to a 4-year institution. That's a lot of the pathway that our students take. You really heard that, actually, our student Anna tonight. I had that conversation with her before the meeting started. That's really going to be her pathway. She's graduating with us. She's going to go on and continue studying the culinary program at COD, and then she has aspirations after that at some post-secondary institutions as well. So this is the rundown of the programs and the dual credit hours that are available. So I actually listed it from the most number of hours to the smallest number. So there's quite a long list here of the programs and the dual credit opportunities for our students. Industry credentials. This is also part of the experience at TCD. So there's credentials within these programs, and students throughout their time at TCD, different points in time during the year, they are taking these credential exams and receiving these certifications. So again, 2 slides to list all those different opportunities. So kind of bringing it all together now with some specific programs. So the nursing program, what I think is really exciting is we're able to blend what we offer here at Wheaton, Warrenville South, and Wheaton North with the TCD programming to give students a career pathway experience. And so, for example, we're going to submit next year to the state board for nursing endorsement. So there's multiple courses at north and south that students could take connected to that nursing pathway, but then they could go on to TCD and specifically study nursing. Within that program, they could get up to 13 dual credit hours. There are clinical hours built into that existing programming already. And there's, as you can see here too, they have the industry credentials. We have co-curriculars that are connected to the medical field as well. So that's one example. The second example that we've identified is for hospitality and tourism. This is actually connected again to our programming with the foods programming that we offer. So we have multiple foods courses at our 2 campuses, but then also the fantastic opportunity that sits at TCD for students to specifically go into the programming for professional cooking and baking and service, which is up to 6 dual credit courses. Right now, TCD has internship opportunities for select students, so that is also an opportunity. You see all those industry credentials listed there, and co-curriculars as well that are connected to hospitality and tourism. Before I wrap up, I don't have a slide on this because this was just timely to my day today. I had the opportunity to go to Wheaton North, and I was invited by the 2 teachers that are doing the college composition course, the brand new course that we have this year. I know Ethan took the first semester of that course. This is the second semester, and they were doing some projects, and one of the students that was in that course is a student at TCD. And so I happened to get the opportunity to talk to her, and she was telling me how she's going to go to COD next year with 13 credits. So she took she took the college composition 1 and 2. She took sociology, and then she took the HVAC program. And so she's moving on to COD next year. But because she has so many dual credit courses, she's actually going to expand and not just study HVAC next year. She's also going to go on and study business because she already feels that she can go into doing both. And in talking to her, I really enjoyed it. She just felt like her senior year was just so incredibly practical because it was connected to something that she sees a future in for herself. So it was just really serendipity that I happened to meet this student today and talk to her about her programming. So certainly happy to take any questions.
Ward?
So projected enrollment for next year, slide 8 is jump from 169 to 218. What do you think is why is that?
In my investigation, what I heard from the counseling team is that, and also talking to students about this too, is the cost of college is significant, and the dual credit opportunities that are available at TCD are really enticing for students.
And you don't have to take an AP exam to get those credits?
No.
Hey, Melissa, Kaylee or Ethan, you have any thoughts on why you think that might be expanding? I know we didn't ask you to think about
Yeah,
this.
absolutely. So I have a friend right now on the multimedia one. I have one friend, I'm very proud of her. She's a first-generation college student who did I believe it was medical assisting. She got a huge scholarship to the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. She's my AP Bio study partner. She's amazing, and it's just been great to see, practical career experience. I know we face an attendance issue in America right now, but also even in our schools. And when we talk about, okay, what motivates seniors to get to school every day, it's like, how am I getting my experience to be able to build up to college? I go to school right now. I get my projects done on time. I do all that so that I can build up a work ethic for college. But, specifically to get students engaged. Every student I've ever met who is in TCD loves it. You get to skip gym class, which is a huge plus. And most importantly, like they can get jobs of $25 to $30 an hour, you know, and you're looking at a $15 per hour minimum wage job. Imagine like maybe they have financial struggles for college, they need to save up. Like if they're working as a CNA, they can automatically start paying into a 401k, paying into a Roth IRA, investing, and all of those life skills are so important. So this program, the truth is not every kid wants to go to college, and I think our school has a really great way to get us off to college, but the fact that we have TCD sets you up to be able to say, okay, maybe I don't want to go to college, but I want to walk out of high school with a job, and I want to show that I have the experience. So it's been very helpful, and it's a huge impact on the students. It's great. It provides them with a pathway that isn't just, okay, you have to go to college.
Yeah, and I mean, personally speaking, I know my sister went to TCD, and when she graduated from Wheaton North and TCD, she was a certified nursing assistant herself, so she was able to work in a nursing home making more money than she would have working the fry station at McDonald's. But that kind of also, you know, because she wanted to go into nursing when she went to college, so that kind of helped her get her feet on the ground and get her hands a little wet before she changed her major. But I think that there's a lot of there's definitely a lot of students that are interested in those programs, though, and they're very important.
If I may also say, seriously, what Mrs. Murphy is doing is providing students with an outlook past high school. And again, I talk a lot about the attendance crisis because when I, my sophomore year, I missed a ton of school because I was having some issues. But my big thing is, like, if I had had my eyes on the future, I really wonder what would have happened. And, like, having that switch for me is what causes me to go to school. And I think that's for a lot of students. And so supporting Mrs. Murphy in whatever program she's creating, whether it be college comp, things like that, like, she's got good ideas. And think about, like, okay, your student wants to do an engineering. Student wants to do an engineering class. Like, show future engineers what they're getting into. Have them go talk to people. The point of District 200 is excellence. And if we want to strive for excellence in the modern world, give them that experience. They want to be a superintendent? Have them go shadow Dr. Schuler for a day, right? We can do it with teaching. We can do it with so many things. But there's so many opportunities. And digging into that, I promise you, you'll see attendance rates spike up once you start showing kids there's more than just high school.
I just want to add on to the enrollment as well. I should say, first and foremost, I really want to thank the board for their support for this number of students attending TCD. And District 200 actually has the second largest enrollment of the 14 member districts at TCD. I think that's just important for you to know too.
Who's number one?
It's Glenbard.
Oh.
How many until we catch them?
Somewhat related to that, can you talk about, so TCD, my understanding, is a pretty awesome facility compared to some of the other counties. Can you maybe touch on what our other counties have available to them?
Well, I have not toured any other counties, but this is my understanding as well, is that the other counties are extremely envious of the Addison location because of the large square footage that it offers and the space and the equipment, certainly.
Right, I can speak to that actually a little bit. So Kane County, when I was in Kaneland School District, we held the Career Center Cooperative for the Kane County region. It was called Fox Valley Career Center. It was adjacent to Kaneland High School. The facility was nothing like what TCD is. So we did not have the breadth of program opportunities. Really, TCD is a unique situation, both in terms of square footage and I think their ability not only to create programs, but to actually have lab space associated with those programs, whatever it is. So it is unique compared to others.
So this is not a full breadth of knowledge, this statement, right? But I would love to see us continue to elevate the brand of Pathways, both with students and the community. And then I would love to, and maybe not these ambassadors, I think you have enough to do going on right now, but to hear from our next group of ambassadors how we work together on that branding, right? Because there's so many phenomenal stories at this table that, does it penetrate our schools and our parents and our community? Maybe, but I'd love to do more work there. It would be great. Thank you.
So, just kind of an open question. Looking forward, what would you need from the board to make this, or want from the board to make this even more powerful? Besides more money.
Yeah, well, I think really it's largely the support. So I think to Rob's point, just recognize that as we continue to elevate, to raise awareness and help students understand the opportunity, it does have its budgetary impact, right? I mean, you are supporting attendance at TCD through budget, and I guess my assumption in that is that while you want to simultaneously like embrace and support that opportunity, you want to continue to offer the breadth of opportunity that you're offering inside of both Wheaton North and Wheaton Warrenville South. So, there's always a little bit of challenge as you kind of spread out opportunity, and that the more concentrated the opportunity, the lower your like unit cost for that opportunity. The more you spread it out, sometimes the higher your unit cost. So just understanding that, and I guess understanding that ultimately, to Kaylee's point, what this is really about is looking at our experience in District 200 through the lens of the individual student, and did we do what we needed to do to open up the pathway, the excitement, to just understand that as cost. So Brad's a long way of just saying, I think the best thing right now is continue to support this expansion, and the fact that it's going to continue to have some kind of incremental cost increase. It's going to go with that.
I guess just another question on the front end of all this. So are we doing screening surveys with our 8th grade students to begin the career pathways exploration?
Yeah,
Can you
this
touch a
is-
little bit on how that goes?
Yeah, so this is our second year doing that. Last year we utilized COD's tool for it, but you may remember that the board approved School Links last year, and so this was our first year in utilizing the School Links product with our 8th grade students, and so all 8th grade students are taking that career interest survey. As well, I also should mention, with this career pathways work, we also are starting conversations with our middle schools in terms of how do we connect our middle school electives to those career opportunities as well for employment. So School Links has been a great product for us, and the launching point is in 8th grade.
Any other questions or comments, board? All right, thank you. We have no discussion items for tonight, and we have had 3 board committee meetings. So the first was facilities committee that met on April 25th. Notes were attached in the agenda items. Mr. Paulson, any additional comments?
The only additional comment was we did talk about summer 2025 work and begin looking at options within the typical operating budget, with the idea of trying to narrow that down and start into the process so that we can hit the market with construction bids for next summer's work.
Thank you. Board Finance Committee met on May 2nd. Mr. Long, any additional feedback?
Just 2 things. We passed the interest earnings resolution, and remember that's related to the bond repayments and the ability to give us the flexibility to potentially bring those funds in operating. Part of that was it was those earnings that accumulated that led to the abatement. So it just gives us the flexibility. Did I say that right, Brian? You got something else to say?
You did, but it also affords you the same opportunity within the rest of your funds.
Yeah.
So once you declare interest earnings as interest earnings, they stay as interest earnings in their individual funds. You have the ability to move those interest earnings throughout all of your funds then. So 10 through 70, not just debt service.
Okay, thank you. And then the only other thing is last month I had mentioned the potential cash flow issue around payments of real estate taxes from the county. The first date, June 10th, we won't have an issue. A month ago we thought we could have an issue should the payments be late. So that we have a high degree of confidence that we will get payments for the second date, which I think is the 24th in terms of payroll. And what we're talking about is if the county didn't pay us because bills were late coming out, if they didn't send us the money, we might have to go out and borrow. But we won't have to do that on the 10th, and we feel very high that it's highly improbable we'll have to do on the 24th. And I think it's also a good time to point out that this is the reason we have that 25 to 35% fund balance. We have those monies because of the ebbs and flows of the cash flow, because it wouldn't be cheap to go borrow the money. So that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Long. The HR Policy Committee met on April 26th. Ms. Kullwitz?
Yes, our notes are in the board packet, so I'll just be brief here. We went over the latest issue of press. We continued our discussion on the social media guidelines. And one thing I did want to highlight is we talked about a who to contact grid that Alyssa prepared. So if you have, it kind of identifies by topic what question you might have and what sort of the contact points are. And so that's on the website on the, if you go to menu, parents, and then who to contact.
Any questions, board members? Any additional reports from board members? Mr. Rutledge, looks like you're ready.
Well, this afternoon I followed what Melissa did earlier.
In your mic there, John.
What's that?
Yeah, Mike.
Sorry. This afternoon I followed what Melissa did. I went over to the north for the dual credit English learning presentations. Fantastic. Those kids are really on top of it. Very impressed. Several of us were at the retirement and service anniversary celebration. We had the Celebrate Our Stars here recently. That was great. I want to compliment the Wheaton North folks that did Mamma Mia. I don't know if any of you saw it. It was outstanding. These kids are right up there at professional. And I also just want to follow up by saying that Lowell had their 5K race a couple weeks ago, and of all the members of the board, I had the fastest time.
I have no doubt. I have no response. That's outstanding. Any other reports from board members?
I have a few. One of my adopted schools is Wheaton North, and I had the opportunity to go and be a judge for their business incubator class. So that was a really interesting experience where our students are learning entrepreneurship throughout the whole year. Different things from trademarking and how to determine cost of a good sold. And it was really interesting to see that practical knowledge that they had there. Transition Center is another one of my adopted schools, and I had a chance to go to their special games, and that was an amazing event where they competed against different schools in our district and some outside of our district. Also went to Wheaton North's Breakfast of Champions, where teachers recognize a student that really just goes above and beyond, and so the teachers would give a presentation on the student and just say a few words about them. And really an amazing testament to our students and also our teachers and all of the great things they're seeing in them. And then the last thing is not at one of my adopted schools, but at my home school, there was a spring concert. And just one thing that really stood out that I want to acknowledge is how many of our teachers spent their evenings at the concert and came to it. That it was like, as I was stood there, they just kept on walking in. And I think we had the whole 5th grade teacher team there. So. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Any additional reports from board members? All right.
I would just make one comment. The Monroe Middle School is having their Eagle celebration. Yeah. I think it's May 22nd. I always attend those, and I'm going to be out of the country, so I won't be able to. But if any of you have a chance to attend that, it's really inspirational.
Agreed. Thank you, Jim. All right, we have 4 written reports that are posted on the agenda. We have our monthly financial reports, our Freedom of Information Act report, our board communication log, and our Citizens Advisory Committee report. We have 2 topics for future discussion, which is the fiscal year 25 tentative budget and the middle school facilities plan. Board, are there any additional topics you want considered for future discussion?
Rob, I have one. Just kind of getting it on to have a further discussion about the pay rates for the classified staff.
Say it, pay rates?
Pay rates for classified staff.
Yeah.
Especially looking forward to next year and the needs that we have. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any additional topics? All right, our next board meeting will be June 12th at 7 o'clock here at the School Service Center. We do have closed sessions, so we're going to be moving into closed session. Board, I need a motion and a second to adjourn to closed session pursuant to the Illinois Open Meetings Act exemption 5 ILCS 120 /2, Part C, Part 1.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Long.
Second.
Second by Ms. Gullivitz. Ms. Hutchison, will you please call the roll?
Yes.
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 Yes. So the meeting's adjourned to closed session, and there is no action expected following the closed